Ahoy, I'm Scurvy Banana. I make YouTube videos and stuff about pirate-themed video games. This one in particular is a continuation of my initial Pirate101 video where I went over what is essentially my first thoughts while playing through the game's introduction for the first time. Go ahead and check that out if you need a refresher. As well as this, if you want to pillage and plunder me sub button, that'd be great. Now, let's get on with it. I've completed what I believe to be everything playable up until the first visit of Monquista, 100% of Skull Island and its surrounding colonies.
Looking for Ratbeard, are we, Captain? I can help you, young pirate.
Finishing up where we last left off before, turning our quest into Avery, he'll present us with a new task. There's a bit of exposition here where he explains that the richest captain to ever sail was a certain Mr. Gunn.
Gunn sailed to Mushu.
Gunn made his riches smuggling a mystical yum-yum fruit off the Asian-themed Mushu Island. This place seems to be inhabited by farm animals. Samurai cows, ninja pigs, and kung fu goats.
The most precious commodity in the Spyro.
Anyways, yum-yum fruit, I think, is some sort of reference to One Piece and their gum-gum fruit, as well as maintaining various cooking properties, notably being turned into the P101 kid-friendly version of every pirate's favorite drink, rum. Also, Captain Gunn's character design looks awfully like a certain famous drink brand mascot.
Yum cake, yum pudding, but his real stroke of genius was when he bottled it, and he called his creation Yum.
As said before, this Captain Gunn is supposed to have been the most wealthy sailor in the air seas, but his riches were lost with his death, until now.
When he retired, Captain Gunn was the richest pirate in history. And then he died.
Captain Avery is on good standing that one of his associates has found the last will and testament of Captain Gunn, in which he sends us to convene. Now, I never trusted Captain Avery to begin with, and at this point, seeing how he definitely used some pirate wit with his underhanded promise of rewarding us with a ship, my gut instinct must have been correct. He sold us on his ship, but now we're squabbling over semantics because he technically does give us a ship, just really not a good one. I'll also point out here that I really love the idea of holding the ships in bottles. Thematically, it is so fitting for a whimsical fantasy universe like this, and of course it plays on the ever-popular decoration. Fun fact, the oldest ship in a bottle sits in a northern German museum and dates back to 1784. During the meeting over the new beneficiaries of Captain Gunn's will and testament, a certain Ratbeard and crew cause a scuffle and flee with the legal document. There's a bit of a chase to track down the rats, but ultimately we are led to the Blood Shoals and discover Ratbeard turned on his remaining crew, secretly poisoning them. From here, their ghosts are stuck in the land of the living, and they vow to aid us if we in turn help their spirits pass on.
Wait, you still live?
At this point, I think we can do these 3 rat ghost quests in any order. I really liked this little trader's cave area, the table all set up for a feast with the dead crew strewn about and their flustered ghosts, paths off in different directions leading toward the different quests. It reminds me of a sort of very miniaturized version of the Banjo-Kazooie or possibly Crash Bandicoot hub world system. Also shoehorning this in here as well, but I still really love the character design here. Of course, the typical pirate reference characters like Ratbeard or Blind Mew. I also think the side ones are really fun as well. Particularly, I like this old crab man, Uncle Scuttles. Someday, when I'm old and wrinkled and my eyes bug out like that, I hope I can be half as cool as this old salt.
Yar! Good to meet ya. Uncle Scuttles, they call me. Back in my youth, I was quite the pirate myself.
You have done well, Scaleless One.
First rat that I went with was Manny. He explains that previous to joining up with Ratbeard, he was a part of Zadok's crew seeking out a lost city of gold. They went into a certain cave passageway, some sort of workplace accident happens, and that strands Zadok in the cave, with our traitorous rat led to his current fate. Coincidentally, this locked-up cave containing Zadok is just a few paces down the hallway.
Who the blazes are you? Back! Stay back! I warn you, this place has mighty guardians!
Our player pirate has a bit of a meeting with Zadok, who at this point has lost his marbles a bit. Ultimately, we're led up an elevator to this supposed city of gold. There doesn't really seem to be that much gold up here, as much as Aztec-themed dinosaur people who are bickering a bit with themselves, as well as threatening to bonk us on the head just for being a human.
What am I? I am Aztecosaur, from doomed Azteca. My ancestors built this place long ago, and then entombed themselves, leaving the city to the jungle.
To make a long story short, we prove our capability to help the lizards by hunting and collecting up a magical crystal skull, and now endearingly as the Scaleless One, we rescue their civilization from the cursed evil wizard lizard spirit from within the Pyramid of Fire. Exciting stuff. We are rewarded with a bit of gold, which we hand off to Zadok before telling Manny the Mouse that we fixed his problem that guilts his spirit into persistence. Personally, this section I thought was super rad. I am very much so fascinated with the themes based around ancient history. When I was in my younger years, I was very interested in Warhammer Fantasy Battles models, and my models of choice were in fact the Seraphon, or Lizardmansaurus, or whatever they're called now in the newest iteration. Regardless, they were tribal Mesoamerican themed lizards and dinosaurs. So this section of gameplay was really right up my alley in terms of hitting on some of those nostalgia points. One thing I did notice once I got into this section was that if you queue for a group dungeon instance and then start doing it without a group, they do not join in on you. Instead, what happens is that you're pulled out of the dungeon and you start the whole thing from the beginning again with the new group members. I guess this makes sense because it seems as though the encounters are scaled per party size, but if I would have realized this and it was how it worked, I wouldn't have been in the group queue while also doing the instance.
Zadok's alive and well. Found his city of gold at last, did he?
As well as this, maybe I just didn't understand how it worked, but I did have to start backtracking all the way to the beginning of the dungeons to exit. That's a lot of walking through empty rooms.
Bad mojo here. Much bad mojo.
The next one of these hazy blue rat boys we speak with is Mo. Mo's problem is that he betrayed his ex-lover Wilhelmina. They were supposedly set to marry before Wilhelmina was swept off her feet by the more dashing Captain Gordon. Mo, realizing Wilhelmina refuses to marry without her mother's heirloom wedding ring, decided to go about the situation like a jealous pirate rat would and steal the thing. We get to go dig it up.
My ring! Wherever did you... Oh, no.
After taking the ring to Wilhelmina, she discloses that her wonderful Mr. Gordon has been captured by the smugglers after failing to stop their operation. Now I've got a few different equipment upgrades. I'm looking less like a pilgrim and more like a proper New Orleans Baron Samedi, chicken bone top hat and all. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is part of the story that went on a bit of a wild goose chase, and my brain decided to almost completely check out. At a certain point, I felt like I was only following the yellow quest arrow around and really not taking in the context of anything else going on in the story.
A yellow circle means you can't attack the ship now. You're in a wind lane, or it's friendly.
Despite checking out mentally, at this point my smooth brain did finally manage to discover in the settings menu how to resize the UI. This probably makes the viewing experience a bit better, since now there's not a bunch of interface in the way of what's actually going on, even though what's going on is just more battles with crab dudes and rat guys, and I don't know, maybe there's a shark in there at some point. During this section, we get our first introduction into the ship system, including battles. I was very excited for this, but really let down. In terms of just ship movement, there is no wind mechanics, the airboats just kind of drive themselves. You can, however, sit in some mapped out wind lanes, which work something similar to those flat escalator thingies that airports have. Alternatively to this, even, you can use a paid fuel source to enable a sort of rocket boost. The worst thing about this, that it is incredibly easy to lose momentum and speed by accident, by accidentally activating the combat. If you get within the aggro range of another ship, it will automatically nearly stop you and force your boat to move at a snail's pace. The combat itself is objectively the absolute worst part of Pirate 101 gameplay that I have encountered so far. While doing side quests off camera, I dreaded the ship combat ones so much that I didn't do them until the end. That was maybe a bad choice, because then I suddenly had a quest log full of the same experience, and that is often the sort of thing that leads into burnout. Why is the broadside combat so bad, you might ask? Well, firstly, the cannons are not directional. The ships can be facing in any direction, and the game will auto-target and auto-shoot. This, by default, really, for a lack of a better term, dumbs down this style of combat that, in comparison to pretty much every single other boat game, is much more tactical or hands-on arcade experience. Besides the standard naval artillery being on auto mode, you've got a couple other typical mmorpg type skills off to the side to use. Basically, what it boils down to is that all ship combat situations are two ships sitting and waiting on cooldowns unless you decide to board. The boarding combat functions pretty much exactly the same as the land combat, with the exception that the damaged ships will have hazards on them, like fiery bits on the grid. Unfortunately, you don't seem to be able to actually steal the ships after you board them, so we still are stuck with the raft.
Bad mojo here. Much bad mojo.
Despite all this, suddenly we sail into an area named the Perdition's Cauldron, and I'm totally sucked back into the game again. This cave is full of what I can only describe as some sort of hidden, haunted shipwreck. It's got souls flying through the air, and we board an especially spooky ship to fight off some skeletons and ghosts. Just like the Aztec-themed dino dudes, I'd say I have a soft spot for this whimsical and campy, scary, sort of Halloween vibe. Gotta love it.
Now we have the hawk dragonfly. But is this the end of our journey, or just the beginning?
You ain't Jack, and you've drove off Mr. Buttersauce. Get 'em, lads!
The third rat we come back to is Jack. His guilty conscience is over his previous crew as well. Turns out his employment under Captain Avery was only a ploy, as he was paid to spy from a group of cutthroat sharks. We tell Avery about this, who's ultimately unconcerned and sends us off to his head security guard before they in turn send us off to another citizen in the colony.
Jack betrayed us to the cutthroats. I never liked the look of that wolf rat.
Through a couple twists and turns, we discover the conspiracy against Avery via the rat hired by the sharks is actually a conspiracy led by the prawns, who are magically masquerading as sharks to pull the strings behind the curtain.
You think you have won? You have won nothing. It is far too late.
Of course, the player character thwarts the impending revolution and makes their way to the big boss of the prawns, beating up on him also. I'm not sure I really have all that much commentary to make on this one, but I was quite surprised that the first bit of it took place underwater and had my character swimming. As well as thinking that was cool, while sailing around during this section, I really started looking at the clouds. Maybe it was my mind wandering because I was so bored with the ship combat. But I managed to make the possibly comedic anecdote in my notes that the clouds are quite lovely. They look like cotton candy. Besides this, I decided the instances seem to be scaling well since I've been playing them single player, and I also started to wonder, do the post-combat reward chests despawn if you do not pick them up in time? I did not find an answer to that because I was much too greedy to give it a test.
Go tell Laska I shall find peace at last.
Who is the stranger who barges into my house?
Finally, we've made it back to the last and first rat, Lasco. He's sent us on good word to Jonah Town to find some dark criminal underbelly boss named the Frog Father. Jonah Town itself is another one of these real cool ideas the King's Isle team came up with. It's a small fishing town built on the back of a whale, of course an allusion to the Jonah gets swallowed by the whale biblical story. The town itself is inhabited by some 1940s styled pelican fishermen. They send us out and about until we gain their trust and then lower us down into the whale's blowhole. Pulling the entire theme together, the dark criminal underbelly is literally inside the belly of the creature, and the Frog Father is also clearly a 1940s stereotypical frog mobster.
It is a favor you ask of me, to give you information. This I could do, but it is not that simple.
What I'd say is the first real dungeon is featured through this section. That would be the robbery of the Presidio. We break into the Monkey Conquistador storehouse to steal us some spices for the Frog Father. This instance seems to have quite a lot more going on in it than others leading to this point. Previous ones more or less functioned as one long hallway with different combat encounters. In the Presidio, however, you go back and forth between the rooms in the base, you sneak past security guards, there's some scripted moments where more guards will arrive, and of course you end up collecting a key in order to free your new companion. The companion you get here is based on choices you made during the character creation screen. Apparently, since my parents were devoured by a giant squid, I get the crab Burgess Latro, who knew them before their death. I suppose it was a good choice because I came to really like Burgess. Besides liking my new companion character, I also quite liked the Monquistadors. I'm, of course, a bit partial to monkeys, and I love that all of their assets are appropriately sized. After the robbery, Frog Father sets us off to the next section with an extensive and possibly very confusing explanation of the functions of the Frog Mafia favor system. Not only that, but he also passes on our parent ship that had been sitting at his dock.
Your new ship, Captain. She's not much to look at, but she boasts some fine equipment. What do you think?
One-eyed Jack? Sure I know him. He's my uncle, see? And he owns this place. What's your business with Jack?
Now, with our parent ship, we set off to Flotsam in search of One-Eyed Jack the Rabbit. It's an interesting island made entirely out of shipwrecks hobbled together. Unfortunately, I found it incredibly difficult and frustrating to navigate, as the paths turn into a sort of small maze to get around to each place you need to go. We find the Jackrabbit, and he pulls some typical liar's hijinks, and we go aid some horse lady in the flophouse. I'm not exactly sure why, but the horse lady is the first character design that I find off-putting. I can't exactly pinpoint the reason, maybe I just don't like horses, but I found her to be uncanny and gross. Back to the story, there's a bit of a treasure hunt after we catch Ratbeard burning Gun's will. It ends in a very cool instance. Instead of a typical combat-filled tunnel, we arrive to a puzzle island. There's an old crab here named Squinty that I can't help but feel bad for. This aged crustacean explains he spent years here looking for the treasure, and then after we create some sort of miniature Rube Goldberg machine to bust our way in, we kick his too.
You little whelp! How dare ye! This tomb was mine to find. Mine!
Poor
to
guy.
find, mine!
I can talk to you. Unexpected. I would congratulate you, pirate, for being the first to find my treasure.
Now, not only does this island house Captain Gunn's treasure, but it is also his tomb. We do some creepy magic and talk to his skeleton, who reveals that the treasure has been stolen by some water mole islanders who seek to sacrifice it to their volcano. We head on up there and find that they are also working on dunking Ratbeard into the lava as well. This is the first part of the game I felt genuine danger during the combat. I'm not sure if that was just in my head, because at this point I was so invested in the story, or if the difficulty was raised with the Chumbawamba fight. Regardless, I was on the edge of my seat, and oh my god, he just jumped into the lava.
I'll tell you everything! Now get me down from here!
This section concludes with Ratbeard joining our crew, and Captain Avery sends us off with a political treaty to deal with the Monquistans.
You have business with His Excellency?
By this point, my witch doctor has upgraded some gear again and is now wearing a nearly monochrome outfit of white. I can't help but see this as pajamas every time I look at him. Anywho, first order of business is arriving in the miniaturized Puerto Rico parody town, Porto Mico. Considering Mico is the Portuguese word for monkey, we can call this place Port of Monkeys. I have a bit of bias in terms of my love of the animals, so this section really fascinated me. We go through some hoops of getting the right outfit in order to deal with the political figures here, who of course only want to goof on us. There's a real cool ape cathedral, and by the end we are sent off to fix a gorilla problem. Gortez was supposed to seek out gold, but seems to have went off his rocker and formed his own colony in the jungle. Not only is Gortez a reference to the famed Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez, but I think this plotline as a whole is an allusion to the 1979 war film Apocalypse Now. At one point during this section, I encountered a bug that made my character's entire model turn invisible. Of course, this isn't a game-breaking problem, and it went away once I reloaded. It was, of course, blatantly obvious that I had become the Invisible Man.
Gortez in chains? A treaty with Skull Island? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Now we're off to collect Gortez. The settlement the monkeys have been trying to build here is in a bit of shambles. Their water mole workforce has began rebelling. The jungle troggies are raising their attempts at colonization. Half of their expedition has turned renegade in worship of the self-proclaimed golden monkey Gortez. And not only that, but Gortez and his defectors are now at war with invading Clockwork Robo Armada. What a mouthful.
You have not complied. You have not won. We do
Not child.
This is a large collection of tasks to overcome, though overall isn't really anything we haven't seen yet, so I'll not go into exceptional detail over it all, the most important part being the climax fight against Gortez. This is a cool fight where we move some mirrors around, thus blinding him down from his golden throne.
I'll tell you what you are. You're an organ grinder sent by circus clowns to make me do a dance. I refuse.
Stop where you are! What do you want?
After capturing Gortez, we're told to take him to the monkey homeland, Monquista. This is where I stopped playing the main quest and moved on to the side content. My goal was to do every single quest possible in and around the Skull Island area, and I think that I succeeded because the Find Quest button stopped producing any. I did do this portion off camera. I thought that to get the full Pirate101 experience, I did need to take some time playing it without worrying about taking notes or recording the footage or any of that stuff. Ultimately, I had fun enough to do all of the content, but I can't say any of the side quests outside of what I had already mentioned ended up being memorable enough for me to actually go out of my way to speak on it here. Of course, not to say that my experience overall wasn't fun.
Look around you. The creatures that built these temples shattered mountains to raise their perfect pyramids. They drew gold down from the stars.
And speaking on overall final thoughts and feelings, after playing the game a solid 26 hours, and from what I can tell, 100%ing this first section of gameplay, Pirate101 is pretty fantastic for what it is. I highly enjoy the turn-based combat, though I could see those seeking a difficult tactical experience being a bit turned away. This is a kid's game after all. Perhaps the game does get increasing difficulty the further you go. I will say that I slid through it with pretty much ease. On the audio-visual spectrum of things, it was a great experience to me. The full voice acting and cartoon puppet show cutscenes were great for setting up the characters and scenes. I quite enjoyed the hard stance on species and area themes. Overall, the cartoon storybook aesthetic, along with its easily digestible stories, were pretty on point and warmed my heart. The biggest downside, of course, is the questionable monetization method. Optionally paid content packs, subscription fees, potential pay-to-win cash shop, gambling loot boxes are all available for you to get separated from your money. While I spent my playtime during a free week, I didn't feel pushed or tempted to buy more. I could see this changing in an endgame scenario, however. At the very least, to actually play the game to the extent that I did, you would need to pay the monthly sub fee, which I was playing the content through a free week trial period. The second biggest downside is that the ship combat is pretty abysmal. Of course, this is only a smaller aspect of gameplay. As a whole, it is still required to complete quests in several cases. In my limited experience, it was bad because it was so incredibly monotonous and boring, but not bad because it was broken and unfair and exploitable. Since you've stuck through the video this far, here is your secret and hidden monkey fact. Europe is home to wild monkeys in only the single area of Gibraltar. The monkeys there are Barbary macaques, though they are sometimes called rock apes.